All right, AP Psych, we are in part 3 of Unit 4, Sensation and Perception, and this video is going to be a very exciting one to listen to on hearing. So what? I'll try to change up the voice so that you don't fall asleep watching my meditative soothing videos. All right, let's talk about your ear, yo. There it is. Lots of stuff going on in there. So hearing as a sensation is based on the sensory stimuli of sound waves. And so when we talk about sound waves, just like light waves, we can actually talk about the amplitude and frequency of the wave. And so the strength or amplitude of the wave determines how loud a sound is, and the frequency or the number of wavelengths that pass an area in a given amount of time will tell us the pitch or how high or low a sound is, right? So low voices versus high voices, right? That's going to be the pitch or the frequency, and amplitude's going to be how loud. We measure sound waves in decibels, abbreviated with dB. And so know that like for every 10 decibels, that's like a 10 times increase in sound intensity. Okay, and so those are the things that in a sound wave, as you know, I push the air out of my mouth and make sounds, you know, with these vibrations of my vocal cords. You're picking it up as you listen to the video, and so that is the sense of hearing. One other thing to mention related to the frequency and pitch of a sound wave is what's called timbre. I know it doesn't look like it would be pronounced timbre, but that's how you say that word, not timbre or something silly like that. Timbre is the quality of sound, and so know that it's actually a mixture of frequencies and amplitudes that make up the quality of sound. And so there's like complex wave patterns that are added onto the lowest or the like most fundamental frequency of a sound. And so those extra waves are kind of what allow you to tell the difference between my voice and your parents' voice, or the difference between the same note being played on a flute versus a trumpet. Like, you get the difference based on timbre or the quality of the sound. All right, so the part of your body that we're talking about when we talk about the sense of hearing is your good old ears. All right, and so let's look at the ear. The pinna there, right, the outer ear, is your accessory structure. That's what channels the sound waves down the auditory canal. So much so that if you are trying to hear somebody better, what do? You cup your little hand around that outer structure of the old ear in an attempt to make your outer ear even bigger, right? You're just adding on an extension. What was that you said? Allow me to make my outer ear larger so that I can hear what you are saying. So your outer ear channels the sound waves in. It's your accessory structure. The middle ear is going to be made up of the eardrum and the hammer, anvil, and stirrup, okay, which have fun little Latin names on our diagram there. So we can just call them hammer, anvil, and stirrup. Unless you're going to be an ear, nose, and throat doctor, then you have to learn the Latin stuff. But the eardrum is a tight membrane that vibrates because of sound waves. And the vibrations are going to be channeled through a piston, if you will, that's made up of these 3 tiny bones, the hammer, the anvil, and the stirrup. And so, right, the vibrations go through the eardrum, and they start rattling these old bones. And these little tiny bones, you can see the stirrup there, or the stapes, is going to be connected to your inner ear. Okay, and so your inner ear, we're going to see what's known as your cochlea. That the word cochlea is the Greek word for snail, and so that's a filled coiled tube. So there's fluid inside that tube, and it has the inner membrane that kind of bends with the vibrations. Okay. So the membrane is going to kind of bend with these vibrations that are being, rattled in there by the good old stirp, and that basilar membrane is going to cause hair cells, okay, to bend. And so when the basilar membrane bends, these hair cells bend, which triggers action potential in the adjacent nerve cells. Aha! So the hair cells in your cochlea are the sensory receptors, much like the rods and cones in your retina are the sensory receptors for light energy. And so the hair cells are what allow transduction to occur, right? They code those vibrations into sounds. Then the nerve cells will know which neurotransmitters to use to communicate that information to the brain, right? So you guessed it, the adjacent nerve cells have big supralung axons that converge to form the auditory nerve, which is going to send our info, of course, via the thalamus, to our temporal lobe. Oh, got ahead of myself there, right? Auditory nerve, right? Those are the nerves, right? The axons of the nerve cells that are leaving the inner ear and heading on out to the good old brain. Okay, on the diagram, the cochlear nerve, right? So there it is. Okay, next. Oh, that all just came on at once. Sorry about that. Yikes, overwhelming. Okay, let's talk about your perception of sound. Okay, so the sensation, how it got in the old ear, how it's coded and changed to neural impulses, and now let's talk about good old perception. And so when we perceive loudness, right, the brain determines the loudness from the number of hair cells that were activated in that cochlea. And so hair cells can sometimes lose sensitivity to quiet sounds, but they will always respond to loud ones. Okay, and so that's why hearing aids are usually needed to amplify quiet stuff. You don't usually need a hearing aid for loud stuff. So, that just activated more hair cells in your cochlea than did me whispering to you. Okay, so there you go. How about perceiving pitch? We've got a couple. There's our friend Helmholtz. Here he is with place theory. Okay, the pitch that we hear depends on the place in the cochlea that is stimulated. Okay, so we hear, how we can hear high-pitched sounds, low-pitched sounds, right? The higher the frequency or the higher the pitch, the more localized it is on a specific spot on the basilar membrane than is a vibration of something that's of low frequency. And so Helmholtz theory is that that's how the brain perceives the highness or lowness of sound. It's based on the part of the cochlea that is stimulated. All right, so loudness is the number of hair cells. Pitch is, according to Helmholtz, where on the cochlea we have the vibrations localized. All right, we also have a theory for pitch known as frequency theory. Okay, and that theory just says that the brain is actually using the frequency of the sound wave to interpret the pitch. And so an example of this is if a sound wave is frequency of 100 waves per second, then it seems as if it's 100 neural pulses per second that are traveling up that auditory nerve. And so that kind of explains how we interpret low-pitched things. But we've realized that a neuron can only go at speeds of 1,000 times a second. So how this theory's weakness is that it doesn't explain how we can hear things above a frequency of 1,000 waves per second. Okay, proponents of the frequency theory will answer that weakness by saying that there's something known as the volley principle. Okay, and that's that nerves take turns while others reload that can give a combined capacity above 1,000 impulses a second. And so it's kind of like running a relay race in track, in that one person running the mile by themselves isn't probably going to get as fast of a time as if we hand that baton off to our relay team members. And so it's the same principle, that nerves kind of volley the information back and forth, giving each other time to experience that refractory period and be ready to send the impulse at a faster rate. Right, and so again, just like in vision, it's probably a good old combination of both of those that help us perceive pitch. Helmholtz's place theory is much better at explaining why we can perceive high frequency sounds, in that they would be more localized on that basilar membrane. But then the frequency theory helps explain low pitch sounds, traveling at a speed that's representative of their frequency. The volley principle kind of answers how they could perceive the high-pitched ones, but in reality it's probably a combo of both theories that allow our brain to interpret how high or low a sound is. Okay, locating sounds. There is a pretty specific reason why our ears are located on the sides of our head, and that is that allows for some awesome stereophonic or three-dimensional hearing. Okay, the placement of our ears allows us to locate from where a sound is coming. Right, so if you've ever noticed, when people or my dogs, they're so cute when they do this, are trying to locate the source of a sound, you kind of cock your head. So their cute little blockhead, little labby heads, turning to the side, one side or the other, when they're trying to locate, one of us calling for them from the inside of the house when they're outside. Okay, and so that 3D experience, like at the movie theater when you pay all that extra money to go see, oftentimes the 3D movie experience, besides just the funky glasses you're wearing, may also be using different speakers in the theater to make us feel like stuff is moving all around us, right? So the sound might travel from front speakers to middle speakers to back speakers, okay? And so locating sound, pretty cool that the ears are on the sides, not attached to our forehead or something, because that helps us do that. All right, concerning hearing loss and our deaf culture, there are two different types of hearing loss. Okay, conductive hearing loss and sensorineural hearing loss. Conductive means that you've damaged the middle ear, and that's the part that's responsible for getting the message to the cochlea. Okay, and sensorineural, or nerve deafness, it's sometimes called, is actually damage to the hair cells within the cochlea. Biology, age, and especially exposure to loud sounds can actually lead to sensorineural hearing loss. If you have conductive hearing loss and the middle ear is damaged, that just means that the amplitude of sounds isn't as good as it would be normally. A hearing aid can help. But in sensorineural or nerve deafness, the only thing that can help recover from that would be to have a cochlear implant, which actually would be an electronic device that is going to translate sounds to electrical signals that the auditory nerve and the brain can understand. And so cochlear implants, you may know of a classmate that has one, right? That's you see kind of this little device that is actually attached to the back of their head with a wire that is entering their head and sending that electrical impulse to the brain, which was normally done by those little hair cells in the ear. Okay, so yeah, bring any questions that you have regarding hearing with you to class, and we can discuss those, and even do some activities involving this perception of loudness and pitch, and give you some, I guess, more tangible ideas as to how this all goes down. So thanks for listening.